Hey, what's up, all you lovely people? Let's talk about Hush, the new horror movie sensation that's still holding currently, as I'm reviewing it, a highly impressive 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. What a thing! Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with Rotten Tomatoes, this means that all of the critics who have reviewed the film on the site have gave it a positive rating. Because on Rotten Tomatoes, you can only give it either positive or negative, so it has been basically universally praised by the 13 people who reviewed it. Hey, it's still a success. Our main character is a young, deaf-mute woman called Maddie, who writes books for a living. Apparently she lost her hearing when she was still a child, and she now lives isolated in a small cottage in the woods, surviving off money from her book sales. During an evening which starts out like any other, she notices that she is being stalked by this creepy masked dude who, after revealing his presence, makes it clear that he is taunting her, but with the obvious intention of wanting to kill her at some point. Luckily for her, she manages to lock the guy out and lock herself inside the house, but of course that won't be for long as the guy will eventually figure out some way to get inside, so it turns into this kind of home invasion / cat and mouse type of film. It turns into a film in which time is running out for our victim. She quickly has to realize a way to escape, quickly has to realize a way to outsmart this guy who is armed, who is probably a lot stronger, a lot faster than her, who is probably more superior in every single way imaginable. Initially, I was a little bit put off from watching this film after reading a review that pointed out that Hush is more or less a traditional slasher film with a twist. Now you see, I'm not a gigantic fan of the slasher film. There's only one I truly love, and that's the first Alien. Personally, I could never get into the Friday the 13th series or the Nightmare on Elm Street series. They always seemed very goofy to me. They always seemed very, like, for me, the slasher film is like that subgenre of the horror movie that's made for just pure entertainment. You go to see a slasher film to see gore, to see people get mutilated, get murdered, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's not my cup of tea. I usually prefer my horror movies to be a little bit more profound, if you know what I mean. But is Hush a slasher movie? Not really, in my opinion. Like I said, it's more of a home invasion movie. It's more of a cat and mouse movie. It's more of about the dynamic between one person who has to escape, the other person who is preventing that from happening. It's not really about the gore. It's not really about the kills. So is the film profound, you ask? No, not at all. So is it any good, actually? Man, it is fantastic. This film blew me out of the water in absolutely the best way possible. And I will tell you exactly why. This is another one of those films I love which has to be carried by either one person or in this case two people, the two main characters. There are a couple of secondary characters, minor characters, and they are extremely essential to the story, yes, but they don't show up for long. It's needless to say that the acting is very good, but I really have to applaud this script, which manages to characterize these characters in some of the most clever ways imaginable. Which is especially noteworthy considering that our main character can't speak and can't hear. So everything she has to express is going to have to be body language, is going to have to be facial expressions. And then you have the other character, insane serial killer. How do you characterize him? Well, by doing exactly what this movie does, by giving your characters obstacles they wouldn't be facing in normal everyday life, and then imagining how they would react to it, imagining how they would try to figure their way out, and by that way you can have a whole playground, you can have a whole set of options and situations you can put your characters through. And without them necessarily having to say anything, about Maddie, we find out quite quickly that she is quite clever. She is not just your typical slasher film final girl who just escapes and runs and runs and runs and runs. Here, there are no places to run and there are barely any places to hide. It's a house, for fuck's sake. And she quickly figures out that, hey, even though this guy is a ruthless, merciless, killing asshole, he is much stronger, faster than me, this is my house. I know every inch of it. I know this territory. I can take this to my advantage. And she can take it to her advantage because you see, this killer, even though he's merciless, he is aggressive, he doesn't take no shit, he also has some major defects. He is not that very calculated, he is impulsive, he's not that bright either. Now you see why I prefer and actually think this is something better than just your typical traditional slasher film. Here you actually get to see both sides of the conflict. It's a dynamic. You don't really get the sense that one side overpowers the other, that the bad guy overpowers the good guy. No, it's actually a struggle, you know what I mean? It's not just some guy in a mask running around killing people. It is also that. But it's a lot more. The film is also very effective because it seems to be taking place in real time. Like, the film is about almost an hour and a half long, and the events seem to be taking place in this exact time span. Really gives the film a nice sense of urgency, because what you're watching on screen seems to be taking place in the exact amount of time it would take place in real life. And therefore, it's kind of strange that if there's one thing I can say bugged me a little bit about the film, is something that takes place in the beginning of the last act of the film, basically like the last 20 minutes, the ending. It's a moment where our character is talking to herself, but I mean literally talking to herself. She's sitting on the floor, and a mirror image of herself appears right in front of her. And no, it's not a hallucination, it's not a dream. This is the moment in the film when our main character realizes that, okay, this is do or die time. This is my last attempt. Either am I going to succeed in solving this situation, or I am going to die. And it's, in a way, it's her way of motivating herself, you know what I mean? And the idea is clever because we have this deaf-mute person who, in a way, in her mind at least, manages to overcome her disability. She manages to speak to herself. But there's something about the execution that just wasn't clicking for me. It felt a little bit artificial. It felt a little bit, like I said, the film really has this realism to it, really has this urgency to it up until that point. And then that moment happens, and it's a little bit like artificial. It took me out of the experience a little bit. But overall, I loved it. Very good, very nicely done. Good acting, good script, very good sound design. Not your typical gimmicky, jump scary, bullshitty horror movie sound design. I actually watched it on my computer. I had no choice because the film is not distributed in Romania. Watched it on my computer with some very good headphones. Very cool experience. So recommended, of course. Thanks for watching my review. I will see you later with other reviews. I will try not to sweat as much as I did now on the next reviews. I'm dying. It's 30 fucking degrees and I'm already dying. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy.